The White House Counsel's office says there are no visitor logs for President Biden's home in Wilmington, Delaware, after calls from House Republicans over the weekend to turn them over. It's the latest in the continued fallout from last week's CBS News reporting that documents marked classified from the president's time as vice president were discovered by his lawyers in November in his private office and later in his Delaware home. The office stated that it is not standard practice for the White House to keep visitor logs of presidents' personal homes. The Secret Service does not track that information either. The Obama administration was the first to release visitor logs from the White House. And joining me now is CBS News correspondent Adriana Diaz, who has been at the forefront of this story from the start. You and your team broke this news originally, so I know you know everything about it. I kind of want to start by bringing us all up to speed. Kind of what's the latest in terms of these documents? There have been more found at Biden's residence.
Caitlin, it was a busy weekend. The drip of documents continued. Saturday, we found out from the White House counsel that on Thursday, when he was at President Biden's Wilmington home, and he said he was there to help transfer the single-page document that they had told us last week was found in the room next to the garage. When he was there doing that, they discovered 5 more pages of documents. And it's interesting that they used the word pages. They didn't say documents because it's plausible that it might be pages of the same document. So 5 more pages have been found, adding to what we already know exists, which is an additional page in that same room next to the garage, a small number, probably around 10 or less in the garage. And then what started this all, the roughly 10 pages discovered at the Penn Biden Center, a think tank where President Biden had an office after he was vice president.
Now, I know you spent a lot of time last week on Capitol Hill talking to lawmakers, and this is something that Republicans are very eager to talk about since it involves President Biden. What have they been saying in terms of what exactly they're looking for, and are they talking at all about comparisons to the previous president?
I mean, they really want to throw the book at President Biden and do whatever they can to get to the bottom of this, they say. We actually just interviewed Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, about an hour ago, and he has launched an investigation into this as chair of the House Oversight Committee, which oversees the National Archives, parts of the executive branch as well. He also requested visitor logs from the Wilmington home. He said he wants to know who was in the house, who has left the house, who possibly could have laid eyes on these documents, plausibly. But the White House and the Secret Service told us today that no such logs exist. So they don't keep track of that. When I asked Chairman Comer about this, he said, you know, I find that really hard to believe that they don't know who's been in and out of the personal residence of the president. But there are investigations also from the House Judiciary Committee. There have been requests to the Director of National Intelligence to do a damage assessment. And Republicans especially want investigations. They want more information. But some Democrats also want to know what was in these documents. What were the potential risks associated with the wrong person seeing these documents? Adam Schiff is one who's called for more information.
And that shows that there's, you know, essentially a bipartisan questioning of how classified documents are getting out of the chain of command. And I mean, I think that's a really big question here is, and you know, according to experts that you've talked to, what actually constitutes classified information? I mean, what does this look like?
There are 3 levels of classification: confidential, secret, and top secret. And we know that there was at least one top secret document at the Penn Biden Center. So that is information that's classified that came typically from a human source, someone who is providing information, an informant who could be put at risk if that information gets out. Our national security could be put at risk if that information gets out. So those are the levels of classification. But we spoke to Mike Morrell, the former acting director of the CIA, and he told us something really interesting. He said top-level officials have a lot of leeway when it comes to taking classified documents home. Presidents can take them home, vice presidents can take them home, and no one is keeping track of what they take, where they have it, when they're bringing things back.
Wow. And this is these are the actual documents.
These are the documents. No one is watching, according to him. And so he says what this has exposed, both the case of President Trump's handling of classified documents and President Trump's handling of classified documents, which is a whole other matter because he had more than 300 at Mar-a-Lago and denied repeated requests from the National Archives and the Department of Justice to return them all. But what this highlights, the fact that we have two special counsels now investigating two presidents relating to their handling of classified documents, is that there are gaps in the system. And Mike Morrell from the CIA formerly said that, we need more accounting, more oversight, and we need to make the system more rigorous in terms of what presidents, vice presidents, top officials can take home when it comes to classified information.
Yeah, that seems like one of the outcomes that could come from these investigations. Even though they are going to be inherently political, run by Republicans, there is this question of whether they can make changes to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I know that you have been on this story every day for the past week. What has the White House been saying? I mean, now it's complicated because there is a special counsel.
The White House is saying that they are complying with this investigation at the Department of Justice, that they're referring most matters and inquiries to the special counsel. But they did say this weekend that they found these additional pages. They explained how it happened. The special counsel himself, the White House special counsel, the White House counsel himself went to President Biden's house in Wilmington. He said because he had clearance in order to view these classified documents, because it was the president's personal lawyers who found the initial classified documents. So someone with clearance had to go. But it's still unclear why he had to go. What was the White House counsel's role at the House to transfer these documents to the Department of Justice, who also had officials at the House? That's a whole other matter that we're looking into. But the White House says that, we've been by the book. We are fully cooperating. We are following protocol. And I'm sure they'd like to move on.
Absolutely. I mean, the political fallout, I think, is going to continue. But what are some of the other threads that you're following? What comes next here? Is it just now in the hands of the special counsel?
It's now in the hands of the special counsel. His name is Robert Hur. He was U.S. Attorney for Maryland. And what's interesting about that is the National Security Agency is in Maryland. So he has a lot of experience with cases involving classified information. He takes over from John Lausch, the U.S. Attorney in Chicago, who was tapped by the Attorney General to take a look at this preliminarily, see if there was any there. And what was determined is that more digging needs to be done. So that now goes to the special counsel. And what's special about the special counsel is they basically get to operate within their own universe inside the Department of Justice. They get a budget, they get resources, they get office space, they get a staff in order to ensure that there is full independence for their investigation.
Yeah, and that's important, too, because they have to kind of stay out of the political fray. Even though the Justice Department operates independently of the president, there still are political implications there. Well, Adriana Diaz, it's good to have you here. Hopefully you can spend more time in D.C. as this continues. But good to see you.
Thank you for the invitation.